Hello and welcome to Reformed Thinking. I am your host, and I'm really glad you've decided to sit down with us today. We are about to open up a section of Scripture that, I have to be honest, usually gets the skim treatment.
The flyover country of the Bible.
That's a good way to put it.
Yeah.
You know the drill. You're reading through the book of Genesis, and the drama is just so high.
Yeah.
You've just read through the account of creation, the tragedy of the fall, a murder in the very first family, and then the exile of Cain. You're on the edge of your seat.
You're completely invested.
Completely. And then suddenly you hit a wall of names.
The dreaded genealogy, the part where many good reading plans go to die.
Exactly. The begets. We are looking at Genesis chapter 5 today. And it's so easy to look at a list of ancient names and ages. Adam lived this long, Seth lived that long, and think that this is just clerical work.
Ancient record keeping.
Yeah, it feels like the ancient equivalent of an Excel spreadsheet for census data. You assume it is dry, that it's just family history we can safely bypass to get to the good stuff, like the flood narrative.
Right.
But looking at the stack of commentaries, Hebrew lexicons, and theological essays we have on the desk today, I have a feeling you are going to tell me that hitting the skip button here is a massive mistake.
It is a massive mistake. In fact, I would go as far as to say that if you skip Genesis 5, or more specifically the first 3 verses of Genesis 5, you're missing the theological backbone of early human history.
The backbone.
Yes. You really lose the context for everything that follows, not just in Genesis, but really in the whole biblical narrative.
That's a bold claim for a list of names. You're saying this list is a theological backbone.
I absolutely stand by that. Genesis 5.13 isn't dull at all. It's acting as a literary threshold. Think of it more like a lens.
A lens for what?
A lens for the human condition. You cannot properly read the rest of the chapter or really understand the human condition as the Bible presents it without the theology that is packed into these 3 opening verses.
Yeah.
It sets up the fundamental tension of our existence.
So our mission for this deep dive is to prove that. We're going to try to make a list of names fascinating.
That is the goal. We're going to unpack how these 3 verses explain that tension we all feel, whether we're religious or not. It's the tension between the incredible dignity of being created by God and the absolute disaster of being born of Adam.
The dignity and the disaster. I like that framing. And just so you, the listener, know what we're working with, we are pulling from some serious sources today. We're looking at detailed exegetical commentaries on the Hebrew text, referencing the Westminster Standards to get our definitions tight, and really drilling down into the contrast between the Imago Dei, the image of God, and what we might call the Imago Adami, the image of Adam.
Right. It's essentially a ledger of grace and ruin.
Let's open that ledger. We are starting in section 1, verse 1. The text starts, this is the book of the generations of Adam. Now, in the Hebrew, that's Ze Sefer Toledat Adam.
Right.
Usually when we see generations in the Bible, it's just a header. But you've highlighted this word Sefer. Why does that specific word matter here?
It matters because it's very specific phrasing. The word Sefer doesn't just mean story or account. It usually refers to a written document, a scroll, or even a legal record.
Oh, okay. So it's more formal than I thought.
Much more formal. By using this phrase, Moses, and we're assuming Mosaic authorship here, which is the traditional view, is signaling that what follows is not folklore. It's not a campfire story that changes every time it's told. This functions like a title page or a formal legal affidavit.
So it's like opening a last will and testament.
Yeah.
Or a deed to a house, that kind of serious document.
Precisely. It signals that this is sacred history, ordered by God's providence, not just random trivia about who had kids with whom. And notice the scope. It says generations of Adam. In Genesis, these Toledat headings, these generations phrases, are the structural hinges of the whole book.
They mark the major transitions.
Yes, they do. But here, it's doing something really interesting linguistically. It's looking back before it moves forward.
And that's the part that always confuses me about the timeline here. We're in chapter 5. We've already had the creation account in chapter 1. We've had the garden in chapter 2, the fall in 3, Cain and Abel in 4. Why does Moses hit the rewind button? He goes right back to the beginning. Yeah. In the day that God created man, in the likeness of God made he him.
Right.
Why recap creation now? We already know this.
It's the creation recap, and it is absolutely vital for the narrative flow. I mean, think about where we just came from in chapter 4.
The murder.
A murder, yes. We just saw Cain murder his brother in cold blood. We saw his descendant Lamech boasting about killing a young man for wounding him. The world is getting dark fast. Violence is escalating. Death is spreading.
Okay.
So before Moses shows us the spread of death through this long, long genealogy, he has to reassert the original dignity of man.
So he has to remind us who we were supposed to be
Yeah.
before he shows us what we became.
That is exactly it. He is reestablishing the standard. And there's a key detail in the Hebrew here that our English translations sometimes smooth over. The text says, "In the day that God created man." The verb used for created is bara.
Bara. We hear that in Genesis 1.1. In the beginning, God created. Bara.
Yeah, correct. And here is the thing about bara in the Hebrew Bible. It's a verb that is used exclusively with God as the subject. Humans can make things, which is the Hebrew word asa, or they can form things, which is yatsar, like a potter forms clay. But only God can bara.
No, so what does that imply? That it's a special kind of creating?
It denotes a uniquely divine activity, often implying creation ex nihilo out of nothing. It's a creation that brings something into existence that wasn't there before.
So you're saying this is a linguistic wall against the idea that we just sort of happened
Well,
or evolved without a creator?
It's a decisive rejection of any idea of a slow, unguided process or some cosmic accident. This was a divine fiat, an intentional act. So right at the header of this list of men who were all going to die, Moses stamps divinely created on the file.
That seems incredibly intentional.
It is highly intentional.
Yeah.
And he doesn't stop there. He adds, "In the likeness of God made he him." The preposition there for in is the Hebrew letter bet. It denotes the standard or the norm.
So not just he looked like God, but he was made according to the standard of God's likeness.
Yes. Man was made to be a visible representation of the invisible God. He was to be God's viceroy on earth. Theologically, this is the anchor for everything. It establishes that even after the fall, which we know has already happened by chapter 5, humanity is not worthless rubble.
Right.
We are not just tragic animals or highly evolved apes who learn to wear pants. The foundation of human identity, the thing that gives every single person value, remains God's creative act.
That is a crucial distinction. I think sometimes in Reformed circles, or just conservative Christian circles generally, we emphasize the fall, so much total depravity, which I'm sure we'll get to, that we can forget the dignity.
We can, and that's a mistake.
We almost act like the fall erased the fact that we were made by God in his image.
And that is a dangerous error. If you erase the dignity of creation, you fall into nihilism, where life has no meaning. But if you ignore the fall, you fall into a naive optimism, where you think humans are basically good and just need better education or a better environment. Genesis 5 holds them both in tension. It says, look, you are made in God's likeness right before it shows you the graveyard.
Wow. Okay, let's move to verse 2, because the recap continues, and it steps right into a modern minefield. Male and female created he them.
This is another massive theological stake in the ground. It's what grammarians call a biological merism.
A merism. Break that down for us. What's a merism?
A merism is a literary device where you mention two contrasting parts to represent the whole, like saying, I searched high and low. You don't just mean you looked at the ceiling and the floor, you mean you looked everywhere.
Got it, like from east to west.
Exactly. Here, male and female defines the totality of humanity, but it also asserts that humanity, by its very nature, is a binary species.
Which is, let's be honest, quite relevant to our current cultural conversation regarding gender and identity.
It is incredibly relevant. The text is defining humanity not as unisex, not as a fluid spectrum, but as a structured binary creation. And notice the verb again, bara, created. This is not a social construct that Adam and Eve negotiated over dinner.
It wasn't a feeling they developed.
No, it is not a psychological feeling they developed. It is a creational design ordained by God. To be human is to be sexed male or female. That is what the text is asserting.
So the text implies that gender is not something you perform, it is something you are. It's part of the created order.
Right. It's ontological. It is woven into the bar act of God itself. It's as fundamental as being human.
And then right after creating the male and female, it says, and bless them.
And bless them. Don't just gloss over that. Remember the context again. In the narrative timeline, they are outside of Eden now. They have sinned. They're wearing animal skins because of their shame. And yet, the text reminds us that the blessing of fruitfulness, the command to multiply, is sustained by God.
That is surprising, actually. You would think that judgment, cursed is the ground because of you, would stop the blessing. It feels like they're at odds.
It creates a massive tension, doesn't it? The fall deserves death. It deserves the immediate extinction of the race. But God's blessing explains why the human race continues at all. Despite the coming judgment of the flood, which is looming on the horizon of this text, God's favor sustains human multiplication.
So it's a form of grace.
It's common grace, absolutely. Life continues, even in a fallen world.
And then we get a detail about naming that I think most people miss, and call their name Adam in the day when they were created. God calls their name Adam, not just the guy, both of them.
Yes, called their name Adam. The Hebrew word Adam is fascinating. It is the proper name for the individual man, Adam, but it also refers to humanity corporately. It's the word for mankind.
So by giving them one name, what's the significance of that?
God is signifying human unity and, crucially, headship.
So Eve is in Adam, in a sense.
Yeah, correct. They are one flesh, one race. This establishes the concept of federal headship.
Okay, define that. Federal headship. It sounds like government bureaucracy.
It's a legal term, really. It means Adam is not just a private citizen acting for himself. He is the representative for the entire race. Think of it like a head of state declaring war.
Okay.
The citizens might be sleeping in their beds, they haven't picked up a gun, they haven't done anything. But because their representative acted, they are now at war. Their legal status has changed because of what their head did.
Or like a class action lawsuit where one person represents the entire group.
That's another great analogy. If the representative loses the case, everyone in that class loses the settlement. Adam is the head. This is absolutely crucial for understanding why his sin affects everyone.
Right, because if they were just two separate individuals.
If they were just a loose collection of individuals, Adam's sin might have been his own private problem. But because the entire race is named Adam, what the head does, the body suffers. That's the principle being established right here.
Okay, so verses 1 and 2 give us this incredibly high view. God created, bara, in his likeness, male and female. He blessed them. He named them. It's glorious. And then we hit verse 3, and this is where the tone just plummets.
This is the fatal parallel. This is the hinge of the entire chapter and maybe one of the saddest verses in the Bible.
Verse 3 says, "And Adam lived 130 years and begat a son in his own likeness after his image and called his name Seth." First off, that time jump. 130 years.
Right. Adam lived 130 years. That is a long time. But you have to think about what fits into that 130-year gap. The text doesn't list it here, but we know the story from the previous chapters.
The fall.
The temptation, the eating of the fruit, the hiding in the bushes, the blame shifting, the expulsion from the garden, the birth of Cain and Abel, the acceptance of Abel's offering, the rejection of Cain's, the jealousy, the murder in the field, the earth crying out with his brother's blood.
Wow. When you stack it up like that.
It's a heavy, heavy 130 years. This isn't the innocent, bright-eyed Adam of Genesis 2. This is a scarred, fallen, grieving Adam. He has lost paradise, and he has buried a son at the hands of his other son.
And now he has another son, Seth. But look at how the text describes it. Begat a son in his own likeness, after his image.
I feel like I need a grammar lesson here. How does this compare to verse 1?
It's a mirror image, but the reflection is distorted. It's a cracked mirror. In verse 1, God created man in the likeness of God. In verse 3, Adam begets a son in his own likeness. The Hebrew prepositions, the phrasing, it's identical. The grammar deliberately mirrors Genesis 1.26, but the source of the image has changed.
It's no longer the likeness of God, it's the likeness of Adam.
And there's a tiny devastating detail in the Hebrew grammar. It uses the pronominal suffix so, which is the third-person masculine singular. It emphasizes his likeness. Adam cannot transmit what he no longer possesses in its original purity.
Which is what? What does he lose in the fall? He lost original righteousness. He lost that moral purity and that positive inclination toward God. He transmits what he is now, a fallen, broken man.
So Seth looks like his dad. And we don't just mean he has Adam's nose or his eye color.
No, though he probably did. We mean he has his father's spiritual nature. He inherits the contagion of death. He's born with a nature that is bent away from God.
But wait, does this mean Seth is not made in the image of God? Because verse 1 just said man is made in God's image. I feel like there's a contradiction here if we aren't careful.
You're right to spot that. And this is where we have to be very precise with our theology. We need to distinguish between the imago Dei in the structural sense and the moral sense.
Okay, what's the difference?
Structurally, Seth is still an image bearer. He has rationality, he has an immortal soul, he has moral agency. He is not a beast. That is why murder is still wrong, because you're killing an image bearer of God.
Okay, so the structure is there. The statue is still standing, so to speak.
The statue is standing, but it is defaced. It is covered in graffiti and cracks. That is the imago Adami, the moral corruption, the likeness in terms of holiness, righteousness, and true knowledge of God. That is shattered. The mirror is cracked. It still reflects, but the image it reflects is distorted. Seth is born looking like his father, spiritually bent away from God.
This brings us squarely into the realm of systematic theology. You really can't read verse 3 without dealing with the doctrine of original sin.
It's one of the primary proof texts for it in the whole Old Testament.
Let's unpack that. I know we have listeners who might be familiar with the term original sin, but maybe not the mechanics of it. How does Genesis 5.3 teach it?
Well, the Westminster Confession summarizes the biblical teaching beautifully. It says that the guilt of Adam's sin is imputed or legally charged to us, and a corrupted nature is conveyed to all posterity by ordinary generation.
Ordinary generation.
Yeah.
That sounds a lot like the phrase begat a son.
It is exactly what it means. Natural procreation. Because Seth comes from Adam by natural means, he receives Adam's fallen nature. This is so important because it refutes an old heresy called Pelagianism.
Pelagianism. Okay, remind us what that is.
Pelagius was a monk in the 4th and 5th centuries who taught that infants are born morally neutral. He believed Adam's sin only affected Adam. He thought a baby is born like a blank slate, a tabula rasa, and they only become sinners when they choose to copy bad behavior they see.
So if you just raised a kid in a perfect bubble, kept them away from all bad influences, never showed them anything wrong, they would grow up sinless.
That is the Pelagian dream. It is the dream of every utopian society, really. If we just change the environment, we can perfect the human. But Genesis 5.3 just crushes that dream. It proves there are no neutral infants. Seth didn't become a sinner because he hung out with the wrong crowd. He was born in Adam's likeness. The corruption is in the software from the moment of boot up.
That raises a really tricky question, though, and I hear this a lot. If God creates every soul, because God is the creator, how does a soul become sinful if God makes it? Does God create sinful souls? That just sounds wrong.
That is the soul debate. It is a classic theological dilemma, and good people have landed on different sides. There are two main views here. One is called traducianism.
Traducianism. Sounds like tradition.
It comes from the Latin word tradux, which means a shoot or a sprout, like from a vine. This view says that the soul is generated by the parents, just like the body. So your parents' DNA makes your body, and your parents' souls, in some mysterious way, generate your soul.
That would make sense of Genesis 5.3 pretty easily. Begat a son in his likeness. Body and soul passed down together as one package.
It does fit the text very well. Martin Luther was a tradition for this reason. It explains how sin is passed down very easily. If my soul is, in a sense, cut from my parents' soul, and their soul is sinful, then mine is too. But the majority Reformed view, historically, has leaned toward creationism.
And just to be clear, this is not creationism as in six-day creation versus evolution.
Correct. This is a different use of the word. Creationism, regarding the origin of the soul, is the view that God creates each soul immediately at the moment of conception. He creates the substance of the soul fresh for each person.
But then we are right back to the original problem. If God creates a fresh, new soul, why is it sinful?
The argument is that he creates the soul pure in its substance. It is not made of evil stuff, but he withholds original righteousness because of Adam's legal guilt that we talked about.
Okay, so because of federal headship, God creates the vessel, but because the whole family line is under a legal penalty from Adam, he doesn't fill that vessel with the special grace of holiness.
Exactly. It is a penal withholding. It's like being born into a family that has declared bankruptcy. You, the baby, didn't spend the money, you didn't rack up the gambling debt, but you were born into that house, and you are born without the inheritance. You start at zero, or actually below zero, in debt.
So whether you are a traducian or a creationist,
The end result is the same.
the result is total depravity. The corruption extends to the mind, the will, and the affections. We're all born in Adam's image.
That's the reality this chapter forces us to confront.
And the proof of that reality is in what follows. We move from this dense theological header into the list itself. The necrology, as some have called it.
The registry of death.
It's a rhythm, isn't it?
Mm-hmm.
After the first few, you can almost chant it. And he lived, and he begat,
Yeah.
and he lived, and he died.
It is a tolling bell. A funeral knell. Bong, bong, bong. Over and over again.
And he died.
And he died. It proves that death is not natural. We often hear people say death is just a part of life. It's the circle of life. Genesis 5 stands up and says, no, it is not. Death is an intruder. It's a foreign enemy. It is the wages of sin, as Paul says in Romans 6:23.
But these guys lived an incredibly long time, 900 years. Methuselah lived 969 years. That's a staggering amount of time. I mean, imagine the history you would witness.
It is staggering, and people get hung up on the math or the biology of it. Was the atmosphere different? Was the genetics purer? And the answer is probably yes to both. But rhetorically, the long lifespans actually serve the point about death even more powerfully.
How so? I would think it shows how strong they were.
Imagine living 9 centuries. You see empires rise and fall. You learn so much. You master skills we can't even imagine. You have hundreds of children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren. The vitality is immense. The human machine is running at near-peak performance. And he died. Even 969 years is not forever. The curse is patient, but it is inevitable. Whether you live 30 years or 900 years, if you are in Adam, the story ends the same way. The grave always, always wins. It's meant to show the utter futility of trying to outlive the curse by your own strength.
That is incredibly bleak.
It is meant to be. It's meant to crush any hope that we can outlast the problem of sin on our own terms. It's a reality check.
So is this just a chapter of doom? Is it just, as you said, a registry of death? Is there any hope in this list?
No, it's not just doom. And this is where the ledger of grace comes back in. We have to look at who is in this list. This is the line of Seth.
Right. Chapter 4 gave us the line of Cain.
And the line of Cain was impressive. They were the innovators. They built cities. They invented metallurgy, forging bronze and iron. They created musical instruments. They had culture. But they were moving away from God. Lamech, in Cain's line, is a proud polygamist and a murderer. It's the city of man, built on pride and self-sufficiency.
And Seth's line. They don't seem to be building cities or inventing things.
No, but they have something far greater. Seth's line is the line of the seed of the woman promised back in Genesis 3:15.
The promise that one day a descendant would crush the serpent's head.
That's the one. When Cain killed Abel, it looked like the promise might have failed, the serpent struck the heel, and the righteous seed was dead. But then Seth is born. His name literally means appointed or substituted.
So Seth replaces Abel. He's the continuation of the promise.
Yes. The genealogy of Genesis 5 is the corridor. It is the tunnel through which that promise travels. It is moving toward Noah, who is at the end of this chapter, and eventually it is moving toward Abraham and David and finally Christ.
So even though every individual in the line is dying, the line itself is not dying out.
That is the preservation of grace. God preserves this line through the impending judgment. The flood is coming, we know that from the next chapter, but God is ensuring that there is a remnant. It vindicates God's justice because the line is corrupt, they all die, but it highlights his sovereign grace because the line is saved. They have children before they die. The baton is passed.
That's a beautiful image, a baton passed by dying runners in a relay race.
Exactly, a relay race against the grave, and grace is what keeps the race going.
Let's pivot to how this lands for us today. We're not ancient Sumerians reading a clay tablet. We are modern people living in the 21st century. How do we confront our age with Genesis 5?
It confronts us in several huge ways, and the first, and maybe most obvious, is on the sanctity of life.
We talked about the Imago Dei remaining, even though it's been damaged.
Yes, because the image is propagated by generation, meaning it's passed down from parent to child. Every single human being from the moment of conception bears the stamp of the Creator. It does not matter if they are disabled, elderly, unborn, or inconvenient to someone else's life plan.
So issues like abortion and euthanasia are not just social issues or political footballs. From this perspective,
They are theological assaults. To destroy a human life is to assault God's image. The text says God created and blessed. We do not have the authority to revoke that blessing or deface that image. The dignity applies to all. You cannot look at another person and say, that is just a clump of cells, or that person has no quality of life. No, that is a carrier of the Imago Dei, however correct the mirror may be.
that is powerful. What about the way we view ourselves? I mean, we live in the age of self-help.
The therapeutic age.
Right. Be true to yourself. You are enough. You are basically good. We hear this every single day from every corner of our culture.
And Genesis 5:3 takes a sledgehammer to that entire worldview. Being true to yourself, if you are an Adam, being true to yourself means being true to a fallen, corrupted nature that is bent away from God.
Ouch. That cuts very deep against the grain of modern thought.
It's true, though. If the problem is imago Adami, If the problem is your very nature, then the solution cannot be try harder. It cannot be life coaching. It cannot be better habits or positive thinking. You can teach a corpse to sit up straight and put a nice suit on it, but it is still dead.
So the solution is not behavioral modification. It's not about just fixing a few bad habits.
No, the problem is far deeper. The solution must be a new nature. It must be regeneration. We need to be born again, as Jesus tells Nicodemus in John 3. Why? Because the first birth was in Adam's likeness. We need a second birth from a different source.
That changes how we parent too, doesn't it?
Oh, absolutely. I think this is one of the most liberating truths for Christian parents.
Liberating. I would think it's depressing to know my kids are little sinners from birth.
It's liberating because it kills perfectionism. Parents today are absolutely crushed by the pressure to create perfect children. If I just use the right organic food, if I use this discipline strategy, if I send them to the right schools, they will be angels.
And then the kid throws a full-blown tantrum in the middle of the grocery store and you feel like a total failure.
Right. Genesis 5 says, "You are a sinner and you begat a sinner. You did not teach them to be selfish. They inherited it, just like you did. So your job is not to be the manufacturer of a perfect product. Your job is to be a beggar showing another beggar where to find bread."
That takes the weight off. It turns parenting from this high-pressure factory of works into a ministry of grace.
Precisely. We point them to the one who can fix the broken image because we know we can't.
And that leads us to the ultimate solution. Because if the chapter just ends with the refrain, "and he died," we're all in trouble. We need a way out of the cemetery.
We need a second Adam.
The second Adam. This is language Paul uses in the New Testament, looking back at this very passage.
Yes. In Romans 5 and 1 Corinthians 15, Paul essentially looks at Genesis 5 and says, okay, Adam is the first federal head. He transmitted sin and death to everyone in his line. But Christ is the second head, a new Adam.
So Genesis 5 shows the transmission of death. The gospel is the transmission of life.
And think about the virgin birth in this specific context. Why did Jesus have to be born of a virgin? We often think about it in terms of his divinity.
Right, to be the Son of God.
Yes, but it's also absolutely crucial for his humanity. He is the son of Adam in terms of his biology. Luke's genealogy in chapter 3 traces him all the way back to Adam, so he is truly human. But because of the virgin birth, the Holy Spirit interrupts the ordinary transmission of guilt and corruption. He bypasses the likeness of Adam in that moral sense.
So he is born in the likeness of sinful flesh, as Romans 8 says.
But without being sinful himself. He steps into the human genealogy, but he breaks the pattern. He does not have the imago Adami corruption. He has the pure imago Dei of the original creation. Plus, he is God incarnate.
And so, when we are saved, when we are united to Christ by faith, what happens to our image?
The whole goal of salvation is the restoration of the image of God in us. Colossians 3:9 says we are being renewed in knowledge after the image of him that created him.
We're being remodeled.
We are being transferred. We are taken out of the genealogy of death, the family tree of Adam, and we are grafted into the genealogy of grace, the family tree of Christ. We get a new federal head.
That is an incredible thought.
Yeah.
We started with a list of names that seems like a dusty, boring archive, and we've ended up with the solution to the entire human predicament.
That is the power of Scripture. There are no throwaway verses. Genesis 5 is a mirror showing our ruin in Adam, but it's also a map.
A map pointing to our rescue.
A map pointing to our rescue in Christ.
Yeah.
It holds together our dignity. We are created by God and our depravity. We are fallen in Adam. And it points to the one who alone can restore that dignity and heal that depravity.
So as we wrap up this deep dive, we have really moved from the book of generations to the book of life.
Indeed, we have.
I want to leave you, the listener, with a final thought to chew on. We've talked a lot about genealogies today. Most of us might know our grandparents, maybe our great-grandparents if we're lucky. But Genesis 5 tells us we all have an ancient father, Adam, and we all share his fate. And he died.
It's the default ending to all of our stories.
It is. But here's the provocative thought. You cannot change your ancestors. You cannot choose who you were born to in this world. But the gospel claims you can change your head. You can change your spiritual genealogy. The ultimate question for you is not, who are your parents? The ultimate question is, who is your head? Because the only way to change the ending of your story, to erase that final, inevitable, and he died, is to be adopted into a different family tree. One that ends not with a grave, but with a resurrection.
Amen to that.
Thank you for listening to Reformed Thinking. We hope this deep dive has given you a new appreciation for the begats and a deeper love for the second Adam. Until next time.